Accidentally calling her boss arrogant unveils a hidden transformative moment you must DISCOV. The fluorescent lights flickered above Sarah as she paced in the break room, frustration bubbling beneath her skin. The agency buzzed like a beehive, but all she felt was claustrophobic pressure. "He's just so arrogant," she muttered, her voice barely a whisper, while talking to Lisa, her supportive boss. A cold silence settled in the room, thick and suffocating. Lisa's eyes widened and a bead of sweat trickled down Sarah's spine. In that moment, Sarah became acutely aware of the consequences. In a world where pedigree often outweighed talent, she had just thrown herself into the crosshairs with a single word. The towering figure of Mark, the overbearing CEO, suddenly felt even larger. Would this mistake define her? She clenched her fists, feeling the weight of every dismissive glance she had ever received since moving from her small Midwest town. Did they expect her to stay quiet? Would her upbringing, where respect was paramount, be seen as weakness now? The office felt like a pressure cooker. As whispers spread through the agency like wildfire, Sarah's heart raced. The unspoken rules of corporate America loomed over her, a labyrinth of hierarchy where one slip could shatter dreams. Torn between the deep-seated respect she had for authority and her burning desire to be recognized, she felt paralyzed. What did it mean to fight for her place when standing up felt like a betrayal to her own morals? As the day wore on, her mind danced with contradictions. She felt embarrassed and enraged all at once. The feeling was invasive, stirring memories of her parents' warnings about never speaking out of turn. But inside her, the flames of determination flickered. She had ignored her voice for too long. With each passing hour, she grappled with both her fear of repercussions and her desire to forge her own path. Suddenly, an idea sparked, a marketing campaign that focused on privilege and authentic narratives. As she scribbled notes, her creativity surged, like it had been lying dormant, just waiting for the right push. Each word was an outlet, and the adrenaline coursed through her veins, igniting her sense of purpose. But even as praise began to trickle in from colleagues who caught wind of her concept, the escalation of the situation with Mark loomed threateningly over her success. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Now, with fresh confidence lighting her way, all that remained was confronting Mark. As she approached his office, her heart felt like a drum, each beat a reminder of everything she had to lose. The stakes inflated with each step, her identity, her dreams. Every ounce of tension buzzed in the air like static. What if she stumbled over her words? Could she Zhenjiang communicate her feelings without being crushed by that icy stare? The moment stretched, taut, and pregnant with potential. She opened her mouth, ready to explain herself, but the pang of uncertainty gripped her insides. Would she betray the legacy of her family by backing down now? There, in the suffocating silence, the fate of her career dangled on the precipice. Taking a deep breath, Sarah steadied herself. The polished wood of Mark's office door loomed before her like a gate to the unknown. Its grandeur was both intimidating and exhilarating, mirroring her internal conflict. Was it fear or resolve that propelled her forward? With a swift knock, she interrupted the sterile silence that enveloped the room. "Come in," Mark's voice boomed, laden with authority. She pushed the door open, forcing her legs to move, despite the weight of her apprehension. Inside, the air was thick with ambition, yet Sarah felt like an imposter in this arena of power. Mark sat behind an imposing desk, his eyes narrowing as she entered. In that split second, doubts assaulted her thoughts. Would he dismiss her? Would her concerns be met with his trademark arrogance? "Sit," he commanded, gesturing toward the chair across from him. Sarah complied, the cool leather contrasting sharply with the rising heat of her cheeks. Sarah, what's on your mind? Mark asked, his tone oscillating between curiosity and impatience. She struggled to find the words, every syllable a potential landmine. I wanted to talk about what I said earlier, she began, her voice steadier than expected. The word I used, it was impulsive. I appreciate authority, but sometimes it feels excessive. The admission hung in the air, more challenging than she anticipated. Mark's expression shifted, the corner of his mouth twitching ever so slightly. And what do you think you've done by bringing that to my attention? He leaned back, arms crossed, inviting her to challenge him. The pressure was suffocating, yet there was a flicker of pride igniting in her chest. I believe that acknowledging weaknesses, or areas of improvement, can lead to a stronger agency. Healthy dialogue fosters growth. The words flowed more freely now, each one carrying a weight of intention. Interesting perspective, Mark replied, his tone ambiguously neutral. But do you think you're in a position to challenge me on this? With her heart racing, Sarah refused to play small. I think being afraid to speak can stifle innovation. It's not about challenging you personally, but about fostering a culture where every voice matters, even if it disagrees with yours. Each word thrummed with tension, yet she felt an unfamiliar strength surging through her. Mark raised an eyebrow, eyeing her with scrutiny. A bold stance, but one misstep in this game can cost you dearly. He leaned forward, narrowing the space between them. And what's at stake here, Mark? Isn't that why we're all trying to elevate our potential? Sarah fired back, her pulse quickening. I'm not saying I'm right, but I refuse to stifle my voice. The silence that followed was electric. Mark's gaze pinned her, and for a moment time stood still. In that silence, Sarah realized she was not just defending her position. She was carving a new identity. It was no longer about fear of repercussions. It was about embracing the risk of her ambitions. Finally, Mark nodded, a hint of respect glimmering in his eyes. Interesting. We'll see how you handle this campaign. Feeling a tide of relief, Sarah sat taller, the contours of her career beginning to shift. But a twinge of uncertainty lingered. Had she truly crossed an invisible boundary? As she exited his office, her mind raced with both possibility and consequence. The boundaries of her professional identity were expanding, but at what cost? In the corridors buzzing with murmurs about her forwardness, she felt the weight of both expectations and opportunity. Could she harness this newfound confidence into her campaign? As her thoughts tumbled through the challenges ahead, she realized the most significant battle lay not only in facing Mark, but also in affirming her resolve against the whispers of self-doubt. The time had come to confront not just her boss, but the echoes of her own worth. The next step loomed dauntingly. Would she dare to trust herself fully? The campaign awaited, and with it came the promise of transformation, both professionally and personally. As she glanced back at Mark's office, the energy shifted. A new chapter beckoned, fraught with uncertain peril and electrifying potential. But one thing was clear. This was just the beginning of her resurgence. The whirlwind of emotions Sarah experienced did not dissipate as she stepped out of Mark's office. Instead, they coalesced into a resolute purpose. With each step down the corridor, she felt as though she was shedding layers of self-doubt that had long stifled her ambition. The steel frame of her spine aligned with the rapidly evolving sense of self. She was preparing to confront challenges that went beyond the corporate facade. Entering her own workspace, she paused at the threshold, allowing the moment to envelop her. Files and reports lay scattered across her desk, remnants of a whirlwind of meetings and brainstorming sessions. But beneath it all, the campaign project loomed large, a tapestry woven from her visions, ideas, and teamwork. This was her proving ground. "Hey Sarah, you all right?" Lisa's voice broke her reverie. Her colleague's brow furrowed with concern as she leaned against the cubicle. The question released a surge of frustration. "I don't know if I am, but I have to be." Sarah's voice was steady, yet she could feel the pulse of uncertainty beating just beneath the surface. "What's going on? You seem different." Lisa's curiosity piqued, catching Sarah off guard. Sarah exhaled deeply and decided to distill the essence of the earlier encounter into something tangible and actionable. I just confronted Mark about a few things. It felt good, but sitting here, I'm realizing how utterly exposed I am now. Lisa cocked her head, urging her to continue. You didn't ask him to cut you some slack, did you? No, I didn't. And now I have to really deliver, Sarah responded. A spark ignited in her chest. But what if I fail? Or what if you soar? Lisa encouraged, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. You've got this. Just think about why you took that leap. Thinking rapidly, Sarah recalled the stirrings of inspiration that had compelled her to push back against Mark. It was the palpable discontent within the agency, the sense that everything revolved solely around power dynamics instead of collaborative growth. She craved more than mere survival. She wanted to create spaces where everyone felt heard. I'm going to sketch out a fresh campaign strategy, Sarah declared, her tone firm. One that champions transparency and team dynamics rather than hierarchical structures. That sounds amazing. Lisa's enthusiasm mirrored the churning energy within Sarah. This wasn't just about challenging Mark. It was about redefining who Sarah could be in this space. A nervous thrill coursed through her as she dove into brainstorming mode. But along with the excitement came a weighty realization. Would Mark welcome this new approach? Would he respond with the same defensiveness that had silenced others before her? The unpredictability of it all ignited both dread and exhilaration. As Sarah started conjuring ideas, she felt a deep desire to spearhead a meeting with the core team. She wanted their input, their voices echoing through the strategy she designed. It was an audacious pivot, moving away from traditional pathways, yet it pumped energy through her veins. Yet, as she scribbled down each radical thought, agency-wide workshops, open forums for feedback, doubt sprang forth, whispering of failure and implications. What if they pushed back? What would happen if Mark disapproved? Would she become an isolate in the very culture she longed to reshape? Taking a moment, she smoothed the crumpled pages on her desk and took a breath. Bets were being placed on her vision, and she needed to be steadfast. This campaign could only succeed if she believed in her capacity to lead, not through authority, but through collaborative effort. As the sun sank lower outside her office window, she felt the time slipping through her fingers, pulling her toward a pivotal meeting. Would she muster the courage to present her ideas to her colleagues and invite them into this transformative vision? The clock ticked. Sarah knew she stood on the precipice of something significant, a chance for articulation and expression that could awaken a dormant culture. But the risk was undeniable. It could either pave the way to the professional evolution she craved or plunge her deeper into corporate irrelevance. With fortitude rising within her, Sarah glanced at the clock. The moment was approaching. Now all it took was a brave leap into the uncertain waters of leadership. The echoes of others' doubts whispered in her mind, but she silenced them, recalling her earlier confrontation with Mark. Daring to trust herself fully was the first step. The meeting would either crystallize her new reality or expose her vulnerabilities. Either way, it held the promise of transformation, both personally and within the agency's culture. Little did she know, a surprise awaited. Someone among her colleagues could hold a key to a revelation she wasn't prepared for. Would that unexpected ally slide into her life just as she unfurled her vision? As the clock struck the hour, Sarah's heart raced. She stood near the door of the conference room rehearsing the pitch in her mind, a swirl of ideas crashing against the shores of anxiety. Her colleagues trickled in, their chatter a mix of casual comments and workplace banter. Yet she felt a distinct separation, as if an invisible barrier separated her from them. It wasn't just a feeling of apprehension. It was as if each heartbeat echoed with the weight of her expectations and vulnerabilities. "Hey Sarah, ready to roll?" Mark's voice cut through the room, crashing waves of doubt against her mental preparation. He approached her with a semblance of confidence, but this time she detected a tinge of what she had previously dismissed as arrogance. The thought became a flicker in her mind. Should she dare voice any criticisms aloud? Yeah, let's get started," she managed, squeezing out a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Gathering everyone around the large table, she could feel the energy shift, the electric pulse of anticipation linking each person. She glanced at Lisa, who offered a nod of support, silently reaffirming Sarah's resolve. Swallowing hard, Sarah cleared her throat and grasped the set of notes that she had meticulously compiled. "I've been thinking about how our team could truly stand out with our next campaign," she began, fueled by the fire of her convictions. "What if we shifted our hierarchy to more of a collaborative framework?" A few heads nodded, and she sensed the faintest spark of interest, though Mark's brow furrowed with skepticism. "Collaborative? You mean less direction from me?" he countered, a hint of incredulity in his tone. "It's about empowering everyone's input," Sarah quickly countered, her voice steadying. "This isn't just about top-down directives, it's about harnessing what each of us brings to the table." Mark leaned back, crossing his arms, an act that sent a tremor through her confidence. "But sometimes clear lines are critical to getting things done." "No, I think limiting input only stifles creativity," Sarah shot back, her heart racing. "We've seen ideas crumble under that pressure before." A quiet gasp rippled through the room at her sudden assertiveness, yet Mark seemed unfazed. The atmosphere thickened, a mixture of silence and palpable tension building like a brewing storm. Sarah felt the weight of her colleagues' gazes upon her, their expectations resting lightly on her shoulders, a comfort and a challenge intertwined. Building on her momentum, she pressed on, outlining her vision of open forums for feedback, diverse brainstorming sessions and workshops. Each point echoed her desire for transformation, yet doubt hadn't fully receded. What if Mark, unyielding and defensive, met her fervor with disdain? What if he saw her initiative as recklessness rather than innovation? "Are you suggesting that we disregard traditional methods in pursuit of something untested?" Mark's tone was laced with challenge. Feeling the rising heat of frustration, Sarah channeled it into clarity. "No, I'm suggesting we evolve. The industry is shifting, and if we don't adapt to embrace change, we risk being left behind." Mark remained still for a heartbeat, processing her words. Silence filled the room, transforming the moment from confrontation to contemplation. It was palpable, the shift from opposing energies morphing into something that teetered on the edge of understanding. Just as she felt a glimmer of hope, an unexpected voice chimed in. Jessica, a junior strategist who had often refrained from sharing her thoughts. "Sarah's right. My best work comes when I feel supported, when I know my voice matters." An unexpected wave of unity surged through the room, and Sarah glanced at Jessica, finding strength in that contribution. The fabric of her vision was beginning to weave itself through shared purpose. As everyone started to discuss potential ways to implement this collaborative approach, Sarah felt a sense of exhilaration swell within her. Her convictions sparked dialogue. But as Mark began to engage, a flicker of tension sparked back into his demeanor, a storm still brewing beneath the surface. As the meeting chaotically unfolded into a brainstorming session, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that a storm was looming, tensions knitting tightly beneath the surface. Both a chance of validation and impending confrontation with Mark. What would the outcome of this new collaborative approach be? Would it spark innovation or fuel a war of wills in the office? As discussions heated, she formulated her next strategic move, apprehension blending with determination. The reality of the corporate battlefield was dawning upon her, compelling her to prepare for what lay ahead. But there, lurking in the shadows of the conversation, unforeseen alliances began to shift in her favor, and an undercurrent of rebellion started to bubble. The stakes were high, yet for every spark of new vision, there was a looming opposition she hadn't anticipated. Would her next move solidify her as a leader or bring a deeper conflict to light? All she could do was wait for the moment to arise. The room buzzed with a new energy as ideas flowed freely. The walls, once stifling, seemed to pulse with promise. Sarah felt the weight of anticipation on her shoulders morph into a sense of shared purpose. As voices rose and fell, she contributed suggestions, drawing upon her research and experiences. The fervor was intoxicating, a symbiotic exchange of creativity, yet the shadow of Mark's previous skepticism flickered in the corners of her mind. Why don't we schedule a series of collaborative workshops? Sarah proposed, testing the waters. If we create a safe space to discuss our strengths and weaknesses, it could really enhance our creative frenzy. A chorus of approvals met her suggestion, instilling hope within her that perhaps this time would be different. But amid the encouraging momentum, Mark's expression remained inscrutable like granite. He engaged less in the conversation, leaning back in his chair, analyzing rather than contributing. For Sarah, his silence radiated unease, a calm before a storm. During a lull, she seized the moment, redirecting the discussion. We should consider bringing in some outside voices, she ventured, excitement building. Fresh perspectives can challenge our thinking. I could reach out to some industry experts. Mark shifted, his arms uncrossing as he leaned forward. And what if those outside influences mislead us? We need to stick to tried-and-true methods. There's a reason we've succeeded in the past. His tone dripped with condescension, but Sarah refused to be dissuaded. She took a slow breath, reminding herself that this wasn't solitary battle. Her colleagues were rallying, growing bolder with each word. Tradition has its place, but we must adapt to survive. Otherwise, we're just clinging to safety while the world innovates around us. We can't completely change our foundation because of fear of getting left behind, Mark countered, and tension resurfaced, thickening the air. The tide of conversation began to wane, and Sarah could feel her moment slipping away. Summoning her resolve, she stood straighter, holding eye contact with Mark. I'm not suggesting we throw caution to the wind. I'm advocating for collaboration, not out of recklessness but necessity. I believe in the talent here. Her voice echoed in the silence, laced with an unaccustomed confidence that surprised even her. The collective gaze of her colleagues, now spotlighting her, felt both liberating and intimidating. It was then she heard an unexpected rippling of agreement from others who had found their voice amid the unfolding confrontation. I think Sarah has a great point, Lisa chimed in, nudging the debate back toward collaboration. We could establish smaller breakout groups to test new ideas without pressure. The momentum swung, and soon heads bobbed in support. A sense of camaraderie formed, lifting spirits higher. Yet Mark's eyes darkened, his posture stiffening. This sounds like a recipe for chaos, not creativity. The notion landed heavily in the room. Somehow Sarah felt they stood at a precipice, balancing on the edge of collaboration's promise and the risk of losing control. Just as this truth settled, a thought tugged at Sarah. What if she inadvertently labeled him arrogant? The term slid into her mind, its implications unsettling. Had her insistence on change pierced a wound? Deciding to confront the tension before it spiraled out of control, she spoke candidly. Maybe I misjudged the intention behind our conversation. I don't want to label anyone, Mark, but I do think we can enhance our environment for creativity. Mark's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of vulnerability flickering beneath his defensiveness. For the first time, Sarah saw a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. Was this the entrance to a more profound transformation, a moment where both power dynamics and perceptions could shift? A new ambition ignited within her. She could feel her professional development unfolding, the way clarity and vulnerability interacted as essential parts of this conversation. By challenging Mark without dismissing him, she began to awaken something not only in herself but in the team as well. But even as hope blossomed, Sarah felt the ground still shifting. The path ahead was steep and fraught with risk. She needed to navigate these delicate waters with care, and as the atmosphere crackled with unresolved tension, a new idea sparked in her mind, one that would require courage to execute, but could redefine everything. Would it fortify her leadership or unravel the very fabric of their team? As Sarah considered her next steps, the stakes grew higher, and she couldn't help but wonder, what would it mean to push limits, both her own and those of her colleagues? The next chapter of her journey was waiting, just beyond the reach of her resolve. The meeting room, now heavy with unspoken tension, felt both familiar and foreign to Sarah. She wiped her palms against her trousers, a physical response to the rising anxiety she struggled to contain. Doubts pleaded for her attention. Did she overstep? The sharp gaze of Mark weighed more than she anticipated, and for a moment, she felt as if his scrutiny could peel away layers of her confidence. Despite her internal turbulence, Sarah could sense a newfound rhythm emerging among her colleagues. The hesitant voices that had once faltered under Mark's dominance now surged forth like a collective heartbeat, synchronizing into a chorus of experimentation and collaboration. Yet, as she basked in this camaraderie, an unsettling thought gnawed at her. Was she merely riding the wave of their energy? Or had she truly ignited a shift? Mark cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "Innovation is sound," he said, deliberately slow as if to temper any escalating hopes. "But ideas are only as good as their execution. I need to see real promises behind all this enthusiasm." The room's air thickened with his words. Sarah felt as though the ground had dropped, leaving her to hang precariously in midair. She needed Mark's support to ensure this collaborative effort wouldn't fizzle into chaos. Swallowing hard, she turned the focus back to her team. "Then let's outline a plan. We can set clear objectives for our workshops, measure their effectiveness, and adapt accordingly. This way, we ensure that our foundation remains strong." The shift in her proposition pulled at the threads of Mark's skepticism. His features softened slightly, if only for a moment. Sarah could almost see gears turning in his mind, but behind that calculating exterior, his skepticism was still formidable. As she continued to articulate her vision, the words flowed more easily. Sarah realized that she had been apprehensive not because of her abilities, but because of the fear of conflict. Fear of challenging the status quo embodied by Mark. The thought of risking his ire still loomed large, yet the idea of limitation finally crossed her mind. Staying quiet had only stuck her in an unfulfilling cycle. The moment became illuminated in her mind, the realization that every time she had held back it had cost her, not only in opportunities, but in understanding herself as a leader. It was akin to looking in a mirror that showed not her frail reflection, but a more robust self. Here lay the essence of her growth, the capacity to confront obstacles, personified by Mark, with respect, while still asserting her vision. Just as the discussion began to build momentum again, Sarah made a calculated risk. "I believe it's time to have an honest dialogue, not just about our ideas, but how we communicate them. Mark, I hope you don't take offense, but I've noticed that your approach can sometimes deter others from sharing. Perhaps together we can establish a way to encourage everyone in the room to express their ideas openly." A charged silence followed, laden with the weight of her words. The exchange felt like a tightrope walk, precarious yet exhilarating. Would Mark see it as an attack or a call for partnership? For a second, the room seemed locked in an anxious stillness, and then Mark's brow furrowed deeply, a sign of struggle beneath his cool exterior. "I appreciate that perspective, Sarah," he said slowly, his voice measured. "Perhaps I do need to reevaluate some of my methods." Encouraged by this glimmer of openness, she pressed forward, determined to capitalize on this tentative bridge she was constructing. "We all have our blind spots, Mark. None of us are above constructive feedback. But embracing our shifts will prompt growth, not just for you, but for everyone in this room." And the challenge poised itself deeply within the space they had created. Sarah felt the fervor wash over her, a shared commitment to weave their strengths into a proposal that might alter their trajectory. The pendulum of change swung as colleagues nodded in agreement. Yet just as relief washed over her, a new anxiety crept into Sarah's thoughts. What ramifications would arise from pushing Mark towards self-reflection? Would he retaliate? As she contemplated the power dynamic shifting beneath them, the uncertainty loomed. Would initiating honesty disrupt the delicate balance they were trying to maintain, or potentially fortify their mission? The journey Sarah had ignited, a blazing trail toward innovation, could easily become a path riddled with peril. Caught between hope and trepidation, Sarah braced herself for the outcome of this unprecedented collaborative endeavor. The stakes were mounting, and while a whisper of courage filled her, the next move would define her path as both a leader and a team player. The question remained, could the final push toward authenticity shatter the barriers within the team, or would it crack under pressure? As the discussion veered towards realization, Trouble brewed on the horizon. Would Sarah's willingness to confront lead to a greater understanding, or would it plunge her deeper into conflict with Mark? The horizon stretched ahead, fraught with possibilities. Sarah sat in the aftermath of the meeting, her heart still racing. The walls of the conference room seemed to pulse with the residual energy of the discussion. Her mind replayed the words she had exchanged with Mark, the heavy implication of honesty after a long period of silence. The risk she had taken felt both exhilarating and terrifying, as if she had ignited a fuse she couldn't quite control. Outside the conference room, the noise of the office hummed like a distant storm. Colleagues ambled past with a renewed spring in their step, conversations sparking like fireworks. This newfound dynamism filled Sarah with a keen sense of purpose, but it also sparked an unsettling doubt. Had she unintentionally opened a Pandora's box? The thought lingered in the back of her mind, murky, yet compelling. In the next few hours, Sarah found herself channeling her nervous energy into a draft for the workshop objectives she had promised. Each bullet point felt like a pillar, aiming to support the shifting landscape developing within the team. Yet, as she typed, each clack of the keyboard seemed to echo her lingering anxiety. What if Mark's re-evaluation turned into an arduous process of self-justification? What if he revealed his resentment toward her suggestion in future meetings? Clicking save, she took a deep breath and leaned back, searching for clarity. Her reflection in the glass partition revealed a woman deep in thought, colored by uncertainties. "Hey, you okay?" came a voice. It was Lee, her ever-optimistic co-worker who had been a crucial ally in advocating for change. "Not really," Sarah admitted. "I mean, did I really do the right thing today? What if I just made everything worse?" Lee nibbled on a granola bar, contemplating. "You pushed for transparency, right? It's what the team needs, and honestly, you've always been capable of leading conversations. Don't let some fear shake that determination." Feeling the warmth of Lee's encouragement, Sarah pressed her lips together tightly, recognizing the truth hidden in the sentiment. She couldn't afford to be trapped by her fears, not now. "You're right, but it's Mark. He's not someone who easily admits he's wrong." "Then tomorrow you show him you're right," Lee said with a teasing grin. "You're building a foundation for this team. Stay firm. You were spectacular. Just stay visible." Lee's words bounced around inside Sarah's mind. Visibility, she reflected, wasn't only about being seen in the meeting room. It was about establishing herself as a valuable part of the team, no longer a participant in the shadows. Sarah realized she could no longer simply navigate the politics of her workplace in muted tones. She needed to embrace her voice. That evening, Sarah prepared for her presentation. As she rehearsed in front of a mirror, mixing anticipation with vulnerability, an unexpected self-assertion grew within her. What if tomorrow she didn't just present proposals but passionately articulated a vision for their future? What if she challenged everyone, including Mark, but did so with tact? The following morning, as the clock ticked closer to the next team meeting, she dissected her fears piece by piece. There would be no retreat. She was going to be the leader she sought to be. Gone would be the days of hovering in the periphery. Instead, she resolved to step into the light, even if it took her out of her comfort zone. However, even with her resolve solidifying, a deeper dilemma made her pulse quicken as the meeting time approached. What if this bold shift in her behavior altered the dynamics of power in the room? Would her assertiveness push back against Mark's authority, or inspire him to re-establish his control? The question prickled the edges of her confidence, but Sarah felt the urge to confront whatever might arise. After all, every obstacle she had faced had been an opportunity to learn. As she entered the meeting room, she steadied herself. Would her commitment to being visible lead to constructive discussions, or would Mark take it as a challenge to counteract? Sarah inhaled sharply, ready for the discourse ahead, when suddenly, through the doorway, Mark stepped into view. The air felt electric. Tomorrow may not only reveal a new chapter for the team, but also for Sarah as an individual. The moment of truth loomed, one that could either fortify her emerging leadership or plunge her deeper into conflict. As the meeting commenced, Sarah could feel the tension swirling around the room like a live wire. Mark took his position at the head of the table, exuding an air of authority that was both intimidating and ironically reassuring. She noted the subtle smirk on his face when he reviewed the agenda, a simple gesture that ignited a sense of rebellion within her. This was her moment, not just to speak but to assert herself, to show that she had ideas worth considering. The discussion began with Mark's opening remarks, but Sarah's mind was already racing ahead, crafting counterpoints and innovative solutions. She mentally rehearsed her lines, eager to break free from the silent role she had too often accepted. As Mark spoke, Sarah sensed a flicker of doubt in his voice about the workflow processes they had previously established. The timing felt right. She could address this weakness while capturing the attention of the team. When it was her turn, Sarah stood, feeling the weight of everyone's gaze upon her. She presented her proposal with a clarity that felt invigorating, carefully weaving in her vision for a more collaborative atmosphere. But as the words flowed and the expressions around her shifted, confused, intrigued, skeptical, she caught Mark's eyes glint with something she couldn't quite decipher. Was it annoyance? Defensiveness? As the discussion opened up for feedback, Sarah's boldness surged. She casually remarked, "With all due respect, some of the strategies proposed seem a bit antiquated, wouldn't you say? We need to ask ourselves if stifling our creativity has become part of the norm." The words hung in the air, laden with an unexpected weight. The reaction was instantaneous. Mark's posture stiffened, the hint of a frown etched across his brow. He cleared his throat, and for a split second, the room fell into an unsettling silence. Sarah's heart raced, pulse drumming reminders of everything she had worked for. Had she gone too far? The thought was a cascade of regret, mingled with the exhilaration of having crossed a boundary she had never dared venture near before. "Stifling creativity, Sarah?" Mark's voice was steady, but the undercurrent hinted at displeasure. As she searched for a cohesive response, the atmosphere swelled with tension. Sarah took a calculated breath. "Sometimes we become so entrenched in our methods that we risk losing the essence of innovation. I think we owe it to each other to question whether we're resting too comfortably." Their eyes were on her, and she felt their oscillating support and doubt. The very challenge she had thrown down not only directly confronted Mark, but also propelled her further into the depths of her own uncharted capabilities. "What I'm advocating for is a shift toward a model that welcomes open-ended creativity. Wouldn't you agree there's value in allowing team members to explore their ideas without reservation?" Her words hung in the air, a delicate balance of defiance and diplomacy. Mark's expression shifted, the edges softening as he considered her stance. For the first time, there was a flicker of something that looked suspiciously like respect. "Perhaps you have a point, Sarah," he began, but the lingering ambivalence remained. The discussion evolved, the team weighing in with their opinions, and Sarah found herself leading, navigating through the intricacies of differing perspectives. In that moment, a realization struck her like lightning. She was operating at a level she had never fully accessed before. Leadership, she understood now, was not just about commanding authority or aligning with a superior, but about challenging the norm and daring to disrupt a faulty flow. As the meeting concluded, she felt a burgeoning confidence blooming within her, but the deep question lingered. Had she truly crossed a threshold of empowerment, or had she inadvertently started a rift that would haunt her? Walking back to her office, adrenaline coursing through her veins, she fought back a surge of doubt. What would the fallout be? Would Mark retaliate, feel threatened, or ultimately recognize the value she brought to the team? Her resolve to embrace this emerging leadership standing was akin to balancing on a tightrope, and the ring of tension echoed loud as walls of uncertainty pressed against her senses. As she sat down, glancing toward Mark's office, the stakes had been raised dramatically. The moment had come, the challenge was solidified. What she had initiated was no longer just a debate, but a transformation, both personally and for her team, if only she could keep the stride. The door to her growth had been flung open. What awaited her on the other side? The morning following the meeting dawned with uncertainty clinging to Sarah like a second skin. The sun streamed through her office window, illuminating papers scattered chaotically across her desk, reminders of her frantic brainstorming session in the hours that followed her bold assertions. Each paper held potential, yet they also symbolized the weight of her choices. She couldn't ignore the nagging question echoing in her mind. Had her push for creativity alienated her from the very people she aimed to inspire? The prospect of facing Mark again sent a shiver down her spine. Her heart raced, fueled by a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. What if he had taken her words to heart, orchestrating a pointed response that would undermine her newfound confidence? In the stillness of her office, she rehearsed her approach, how to balance humility with the assertiveness that had propelled her forward. When the clock finally struck 9 a.m., Sarah took a deep breath and gathered her thoughts. She steeled herself for the office interactions, determined to engage. As colleagues shuffled in, she held her head high, pushing back against the current of self-doubt threatening to drown her. An informal gathering by the coffee machine turned into her first opportunity, a chance to gauge the response to her proposal. She approached her coworkers, a few glances exchanged in the corner of her eye, their chatter dissipating momentarily as she stepped into their visibility. "Hey everyone, I wanted to hear your thoughts about yesterday. Did any of the ideas resonate with you?" The question lingered in the air, hanging precariously like a freshly cut branch on the edge of a cliff. Some looked contemplative, others hesitant. Finally, Anna, a close friend and quiet contributor to meetings, broke the silence. "I actually thought your point about stifling creativity was spot on. It's easy to get caught up in the same routine, isn't it?" Sarah felt a flicker of warmth ignite within her at the compliment. Maybe she was on the right path after all. Encouraged, she leaned in further. "Right? Sometimes I wonder if we're just going through the motions without asking ourselves what could be better." The conversation shifted. Heads nodded and moments of genuine agreement blossomed. Here was camaraderie. Here was connection. Across the room, Mark appeared, contemplating the exchange from a distance. His presence shifted the energy once again, and doubts resurfaced. What did he think of her impromptu discussion? Would he perceive it as an undermining of his authority? As he approached, Sarah's stomach twisted into knots. However, there was something different about the way he carried himself today. Less like a lion ready to roar and more like a student poised to learn. "Sarah," he said, voice casual but probing, "I wanted to revisit the concepts you presented yesterday. Could you walk me through some of your ideas further during lunch?" Surprised yet intrigued, Sarah agreed. The opportunity felt electric. This was her chance to define the conversation, to illustrate her vision without the walls that had previously confined her dialogue. As the day wore on, Sarah focused on her preparation while attempting to calm the whirlpool of emotions rising within her. She envisioned her lunch meeting like a strategic battle plan, aligning her thoughts logically and persuasively. She already sensed Mark's shift. This could be the pivot point not just for her but for the entire team. When the lunch hour finally arrived, Sarah took a deep breath before stepping into the conference room, the air thick with unspoken tension. Mark awaited her, his own demeanor softened, a sign that perhaps they'd entered a new phase in their professional relationship. As they sat down, she felt the stakes higher than ever. This was not merely a discussion, it was a defining moment in her career, a chance to reshape not only her own path, but also how creativity could ripple through the organization. The conversation began with cautious optimism, each point exchanged like a dance of ideas. But as Sarah steered Mark deeper into her vision, she sensed a tension rising again, an internal battle within him, perhaps echoing her own insecurities about speaking truthfully in the workplace. Just when she thought the momentum was solid, Mark's brow furrowed. "But do you ever worry that pushing too far might backfire? That it could appear arrogant?" His words struck like a bolt of lightning, underscoring her own apprehensions. Sarah opened her mouth to respond but hesitated, grappling with the very doubt he'd vocalized, far too aware of the tightrope she was on. Would she back down, or would she rise to the challenge? Her decision could redefine everything. The moment of truth was upon her. What would she choose? Sarah took a breath, steadying herself against the weight of Mark's question. Instead of retreating, she leaned into the vulnerability that had become a part of her latest journey. I think there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, she began, her tone firm yet measured. What I advocate for is an environment where ideas can breathe, where people feel safe enough to share their thoughts without the fear of being dismissed. That isn't arrogance, that's empowerment. Mark's brows lifted slightly, an indication of curiosity, though skepticism still clung to him. And how do you plan to manage the chaos that could ensue from that openness? His challenge felt sharp but necessary, pushing her to formulate a response that resonated with her deeper convictions. We'll set clear boundaries, she articulated, emboldened by the earlier supportive exchange she had shared with her colleagues. Encouraging dialogue doesn't mean there will be a free-for-all. It means establishing a framework where every voice is valued. It fosters accountability among us all. As the words left her lips, a sense of clarity washed over her. She had identified the very essence of her transformation. She was no longer a shadow in the corporate landscape, but a force capable of defining dialogue and fostering collaboration. Mark nodded slightly, but the tension hung in the air, ready to boil over. That still makes me uneasy. Sometimes the least friction is preferable for maintaining control. Yet, at what cost? Sarah countered, the fire of determination reigniting within her. If we don't adapt and embrace new ideas, we risk stagnation, which is far more dangerous in the long run. In that instant, Sarah sensed something shift in Mark's demeanor. The hint of defensiveness was beginning to slip, revealing the human beneath the executive mask. The conversation was moving from conflict to genuine inquiry, and though his challenges still stung, they felt more like an invitation than an attack. By the end of their lunch session, Sarah had outlined several strategies that could infuse the agency with new life. She had naturally taken the lead in presenting collaborative workshop concepts, insisting that input should not only come from her, but from all members of the team. To her surprise, Mark offered several insights that echoed her sentiments. It seems you have given this a great deal of thought, he remarked as he jotted down notes, genuinely engaged. Thank you, Mark. I believe if we merge our knowledge and perspectives, we can create something transformative, she replied, bolstered by the respect that seemed gradual but undeniable. The day passed and Sarah felt lighter. Each interaction was infused with a din of excitement. The tension that had woven its way through the office now felt more like an opportunity for growth. Word spread about her successful discourse with Mark, and other colleagues approached her, eager to share their thoughts on the evolving corporate culture they were inching towards. I knew you could do it, Lisa exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with pride. Though the reflection of her earlier fears still stood on the horizon, the shift in discussion provided Sarah with an unmistakable sense of agency. She had clearly marked her territory and defined her vision, navigating a precarious landscape with courage. Finally, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the office with hues of gold and purple, Sarah gathered everyone for their newly established brainstorming workshop. She envisioned a space where her colleagues could express their apprehensions freely and contribute to the roots of their shared vision. Welcome, everyone, she began, her voice confident and steady, each word projecting an invitation birthed from their collective aspirations. Let's explore the changes we envision for our agency. As she spoke, her earlier uncertainty faded, replaced by assurance. With each workshop goal defined and collaborative ideas sparked, Sarah felt an invigorating sense of purpose. The office was shifting, both in process and in culture. Days turned into weeks, and the continued exploration had garnered momentum and accountability throughout the team. Sarah had proven not only her capability to lead, but also the power of unity in pursuing innovation. Recognition came in waves, both from the staff and Mark. Sarah knew she had not only challenged authority but had transformed the very dynamics of her workplace. In her heart, a quiet acknowledgement brewed of her own metamorphosis, a testament to her journey of audacity. She had taken a bold step toward articulation and became a cornerstone for collective growth. The fear that accompanied her change had dwindled, replaced by the realization that true leadership emerged from authenticity. As she wrapped up the week, a sense of pride enveloped her. She walked past the floor-to-ceiling windows of her agency, the city sprawling out beneath her, its rhythm resonating with her heartbeat. She had established her place in this landscape, not as a passive observer but as an architect of change. The victory was not simply in the transformed corridor conversations but also within herself. Sarah had achieved what she once believed impossible. She had confronted her fears, embraced her voice, and achieved professional growth through consistency and resilience. As she prepared to leave for the day, she felt her confidence solidified, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. She was no longer defined by her past, but by the horizon looming ahead, one filled with potential, determination, and the knowledge that sometimes the journey of confronting authority brings forth the best in oneself. Remember, you need to subscribe now to the channel for more incredible emotional stories that can inspire you to break boundaries just like Sarah. Leave a like now to support the content and fuel the algorithm. Comment below your thoughts and theories about Sarah's journey, how she transformed from doubt to determination, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this transformative conclusion. This is the moment to show your support and inspire others to take courageous steps toward their own victories. Don't wait even one more second to share.